Well, I'm Paul Wedgwood. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Splash Damage. Of course, we're probably best known for sequels to Wolfenstein, Doom, Quake, Batman, Gears of War. And also, I believe, probably the oldest Sugar Shack reader here, because I used to read it when it was S. Carey's Sugar Shack, around the same time as Blues News back in 1997.
What is it about Shacknews that you like?
Do you know, back then, basically, there were really only, if you were into Quake 1, there were only 3 sites that you read. You read Planet Quake, Blues News, and Shacknews. And I think Shacknews back then had a tone that was just its own, that was distinct. And of course, it was very brown and black, which was pleasing on the eyes on, 19-inch CRTs that were irradiating you at the time. So that was the principal reason, I think.
What do you think it is about Shack that it's still around after 23 years?
I think that there are some of those sites that were there when we started that were part of the original community, because you're talking about a time when id Software were barely making multiplayer games. Those early days of the industry, people have a nostalgia for. I think also in tone, it's nice when something essentially serves a similar demographic, the same audience for a very long period of time. Because now what you have, of course, is you have dads telling their kids to read Shack, and that's awesome,
Did that site have any influence on you wanting to become a game developer?
Oh, we use Shack all the time, because when we were mod makers, when we started, we weren't commercial at all. For 2 years we had played Quake 1 Team Fortress competitively for a couple of years. Then in 1999, Robert Duffy at id Software gave us the source code for Quake 3, and we started on a mod called Quake 3 Fortress. And Quake 3 Fortress over time became quite popular, with people playing it in most major territories and tournaments running everywhere. And Shack was one of the sites that would post, news about us. And a lot of other people, like GameSpy and stuff like that, you'd have to really work hard to try and convince them that you had a big enough update that it was worth getting their attention. But the good thing about Shack is that it was very much in tune with what its audience wanted to hear about. It wasn't commercially motivated at all, so it couldn't care less how big the game was. It cared about whether its audience wanted to hear news. So I could email, people at Shack, and it was true of Blues News and Planet Quake as well. I could send email about a set of beautiful new textures that we'd made, and because we were passionate about the thing we were doing, and they knew we were passionate, they would post, the article, and it would get us players and everything else.
Do you miss that aspect of the video game industry?
I think that the video games industry has changed, as have I think, beyond comprehension. It is now, it's the biggest entertainment, form of entertainment in the world. It's eclipsed movies and music and books and plays and theatre and television. It is all anybody does if they're 16 years old, and it's all they talk about. And it's such a big thing now that it's like, when we started, online gaming was basically, you were either a Quake 3 player or you were an Unreal Tournament player. And those were your 2 options. If you played FIFA or something on a console, we just wouldn't talk to you. We just considered you to be a noob and uninteresting because there wasn't enough Twitch skill. There wasn't enough, Today, gaming is just like sport. There are so many popular games with so many millions and millions and millions of fans that to define yourself even as a gamer is meaningless, because there is nothing to compare between an obsessed Minecraft player and an obsessed Call of Duty player. They're as distinct as somebody who likes cricket in England and, NFL.
When it comes to, you just talked about the comparison between video games and sport. What are your thoughts about how esports has grown, especially with Quake being one of the very early games to enter that arena?
Do you know, it's so odd, because I was one of the first ever esports commentators, television presenters. So on my TV show, which was 2000 and 2001, we did about 300 episodes of Quake Republic and Lock and Load. And we could only even, broadcast our show to Australasia, because there was so little interest in the West in what we were doing. In Korea, they were going nuts for it. When the Koreans came to town, they took over the whole of the O2 in London, and we had, Battletop, and it was my team that did the programming and code and stuff for it. I remember being in a television studio and doing like an as live link up to Battletop because it was so impressive. But then I would get home and like, you know, telling my mum that I was the UK Team Fortress champion or something, it just like, it was complete blank, you know, it was meaningless to her. My team won the Barry's World, Quake 3 CTF tournament, deathmatch tournament. We won the Quake 3 Fortress tournament. I was doing this TV show at the same time at the weekends, like 2-3 episodes a week as a kind of pundit commentator, being really offensive, which is fun because in Australasia you could do all kinds of innuendo that isn't noticed. You know, technically believing that we were broadcasting to an installed base of like 160 million satellite receivers, but knowing that there were only 4 people on our forum talking, you know? It's odd now because I have friends that come back from places like Hong Kong and the Philippines. Somebody bought all of those shows and turned them into a 24-hour TV show. They still have them running in the cheapest hotel. So it's an odd experience to have been such a big part of the founding of esports myself, to have been one of the first continuous esports commentators, presenters for such a long time, to count amongst my best friends, you know, Dennis Fong, Thresh, Jonathan Wendell, Fatality, are people that I've just known for years and years and years. And yet today to feel like I'm so completely out of touch, because even to take one game seriously and to understand it requires you to be an absolute full-time fan.
When it comes to specifically Quake, they're still out there with esports, with champions. What are your thoughts about that game?
Well, I mean, the thing is that arena-based combat, for me, will always be the most fun to watch, because if you're going to watch 2 people competing with each other and you're going to call it an e-sport, it's not chess. It's not necessarily about outthinking the other player. Certainly short-term tactics play a part, but really it's muscle memory and it's twitch skills and it's your ability to aim and it's positioning. And that really, I think, comes to the foreground most fluently in arena-based deathmatch and team play games. So generally speaking, the best and most enjoyable big esports tournaments are always going to be based around very Twitch-based games. But then, I mean, Richard Jolly, my co-founder, and I flew to Los Angeles just to attend the League of Legends World Final, and then flew home again. We've flown to Warsaw 2 years in a row just to attend the World of Tanks World Final. So we still love going to World Finals. We will fly to a country just to watch a World Final and then fly home. But sometimes we'll be sat there thinking, what the hell is that? And what's that? And what's going on here? But the thing is, watching any sport, real life sport or esports, when you watch people at the absolute top of their game, it is entertaining whether it's your personal sport or not.
How do you feel your background from professional video game playing has translated to success as a video game developer?
I think that we as a company set very securely at the start of Splash Damage's inception that our principal interest was multiplayer games, that we were interested in developing and refining collaboration and competition because we wanted to champion team play. And we've only ever done that. And actually the reason I've just given a talk here is to try and help companies understand finding their purpose and to become more niche and more contracted, not to be trying to make games on console and PC and single player and multiplayer and mobile and being too diverse, because although pursuing every deal seems like a good idea, that isn't what's going to make you really, really successful in games. As a company now, we've had 8 sequential #1 hits. Wolfenstein Enemy Territory Quake Wars, Doom 3, Batman Arkham Origins, Brink, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, Gears of War 4. And we've done the multiplayer component for all of those games all the way through. By focusing on one specific craft, we've been able to refine that craft as we go. And I think that although money is not really a motivator at the start, I've only become kind of insanely rich as a result of having that focus. So the money is an incidental benefit. I didn't know that I would sell my 3 companies for $160 million last year. Like, that wasn't part of our plan. It wasn't a thing that we were heading towards. And I grew up in poverty, Like, my mum and my brother and I used to sleep on one mattress, and that was the only thing we had in our flat. So it's very weird to now be one of the executive producers in the games industry that's grown, kind of fat off the industry over time. And the only thing I would say is at least I feel like I have credibility because I was there at the very beginning and I was putting in the hours and we were obsessed with esports and we were doing those 42-hour shifts and we really cared. And the only thing I would say about the industry today is it has attracted so many investors and so many people with MBAs from management schools that it has become a little bit like Hollywood. in that you certainly have a bunch of creatives who want to make movies, who want to act in movies, who want to direct, who want to do production design, who are doing it just because they're completely passionate about it. But the whole rest of the industry is there for the fame and the money. And I fear that the games industry is headed in that direction, that we are now 2/3 people wanting just to make money and only perhaps 1/3 people that are highly creative. Now, I'm very lucky because I still just run a studio, so I have 400 staff, amazing artists, designers, programmers. You know, we're working on the next Gears of War. We're in partnership with Wargaming on World of Tanks. But we're very lucky because we get to work on the projects that we really want to work on. The side effect of having an industry which focuses on the money is that companies are too tempted when big investors roll into town to work on things that compromise their own personal values, that distract them from their purpose, that stop them from understanding and pursuing their drives. And I really believe that whatever you do in life, it doesn't matter if you're trying to become mega rich or you're trying to make the world's best games, if you do the right thing and you do it in the right way and you do it for the right reasons, it dramatically increases your likelihood of success. So that is to say that your drives plus your values plus your purpose equal your destiny. If there is any incongruence in those, if you're lying about who you are, if you're faking it, if you're presenting yourself as an obsessed gamer but you're not, if you're presenting yourself as caring about the industry, caring about players but you're not, that incongruence, like mental health problems in an individual, becomes a mental health issue within a company pretty quickly. And this tends to mean that the people behind the investment committee, you know, our grandparents, the post office staff, the pensions, that money gets lost. And that's sad, because it shouldn't do if people just worked on things that they were really passionate about.
Which is one of the things that's exciting when you come to a place like this and see all the indie developers, right? Those are the passionate people when it comes to getting into the industry. The last thing I want to address with you is having the experience of developing so many successful multiplayer games. What's your take on the battle royale genre that's taken over multiplayer right now?
Well, you know, almost with every generation of new gamers, there has been a new generation of games. And you know, you know, we're friends with the guys who did DayZ, and you know, we remember, if you really, really go back a long way, you know, playing Operation Flashpoint and stuff, and crawling for 10 miles and getting shot in the head, you know. So I personally don't have that as my fantasy anymore, right? And I'm not a huge fan of the kind of hazing, the bullying and stuff that happened in the early titles. I actually think that PlayerUnknown's and some of these newer games have done well to make it more of an instanced experience that has a set of competitive rules that make it less of a title, less of a game about social hierarchies and more of a game about skill and competitiveness. I think just as we've seen Fortnite achieve immense success directly as a result of understanding and moving very fast on something that's popular elsewhere, and just as we saw many, many, many games copy the Grand Theft Auto formula, and we don't now resent the people that copied open world from GTA and say we don't want anyone else to be open world. We're very happy with Assassin's Creed being open world, you know. So I think it's okay. We were always going to get to a point where games had less rules and players had more autonomy, and as a result you had more emergence, you know, more emergent gameplay, more player stories happening as a result. But it's interesting to see that the technology comes along, we get open worlds, we get emergent gameplay, we get more player stories, we get odd, you know, social constructs that result in hazing and bullying and stuff. But actually when it really lifts off, when it really, really takes off, it's when someone comes along and writes a decent set of rules for what you do with the football and the goals. That's when it becomes an immense stadium-filling, you know, spectator-worthy sport. And that's really where we are, I think. There's playing football down the park with your mates and a couple of jumpers for goalposts and to hell with the rules. And then there's playing in a stadium with a decent set of rules that have been thought through carefully that result in immense player skill. And that will always trump the fucking about in a sandbox.